I think we're in business. Yes.
Yay!
Hey, thank you, everybody. Okay,
How you
so
doing? Hey,
introduce
everybody.
my good friend Tammy Luttrell. She is from Houston, now residing in the ATL. Probably one of the saddest days at the radio station when Tammy moved, but happy for Tammy, sad for T. So Tammy is amazing. She is the CEO of the Mezzo Agency and has a lot of expertise in a variety of areas, but in particular, her path as a Grammy-nominated songwriter has been to just really get everybody straight with their publishing, licensing, copywriting, the business behind the music. And as we've been here doing the free game live, that's the biggest questions I get is about that. So I wanted to invite Tammy to come on, and we will take some questions. But first, I think to get us started, I just wanted Tammy to sort of go through some of the basics. Um, so lots of hearts here. Awesome. All right. So Tammy, I was thinking maybe we could just start off. We have somebody. We have a lot of music professionals on here. So somebody creates something, a song, a beat, or whatever. And so, as an artist, what would be sort of the basic thing? Once you create something, then what?
I'm sorry, y'all. It was some popping on my end, so I didn't know if it was mine. So the basics, if they start over. So they create the song,
Mm-hmm.
and then now they're ready to release the song.
Could be. I mean, a lot of times I have people, like as a program director, I have a lot of people that send stuff, but just created something and sent it out, and there's no in-between process.
Right. So the first thing I would say is that if you are a songwriter or an artist who writes your own songs and produces your own songs, because you can be all three these days. Everybody's kind of doing everything, multitasking. You are actually the composer of that song, and it's important and imperative that you protect yourself as the composer, whether you compose the music, the lyrics, or you did both. It could even be you compose the melody, the structure of the song. You are the composer, and therefore, if the song were to be released, there would be a royalty that you would be entitled to, which is like a percentage of your ownership of that work. And so I would strongly suggest that, while, it's not required, I do recommend artists and songwriters and producers to really understand the importance of copyright, knowing that even though you haven't registered it with the Library of Congress, we call it the LLC, it doesn't mean that you don't own the copyright, because typically you can pull up and show proof that, hey, I produced this record, or we did this record on this day. This is the timestamp in Pro Tools. That is your proof of ownership and copyright. It's called a fixed copyright. But after that, if something were to happen and you haven't done your due diligence in court to actually file as the original creator of that work, you're not protected if anything were to happen. And so there are many options on copywriting and getting protected, like having that official seal. You can do it now in volumes. Instead of doing one song at a time, you can actually do 10 at a time, I think, in volume. And so, I suggest for songwriters and producers to try to do it, quarterly, just to save some money. The rate just went up. I think it's either about to go up April 1st or just went up in March to $65 for a digital copyright. And so, it's just a good way. If you're going to be shopping songs, it's just a good way to protect yourself. Even if you have, just a group of songs that are not necessarily particular or part of an album, but they're just singles that you're shopping and just trying to, get promo on, you want to go ahead and get it covered and copywritten. It just protects you. That way, if it does get picked up, you are the official owner of that, and there's not a label or anyone else that can actually file it before you do, like the situation that tried to happen with my situation when I first got into the industry with the Whitney Houston placement. They didn't know I owned the original copyright.
Okay, Tam, if you wouldn't mind, explain what happened to you, because you were blessed and got into business very young.
Oh my goodness. So I'll just bring you guys where I was at. Imagine being a freshman in college at Texas Southern University, and you get a phone call from your mom saying that Whitney Houston is on the radio on Magic 102 singing your song. And
Wow.
so that's what happened to me. I was, I was just flabbergasted. My mom was like, put it on 102 right now. And so when I listened to the radio, Whitney Houston was on the radio singing my song because I was signed to a record label as an indie artist. And I decided that, after we parted ways, I moved on, went to college, and was just going to pursue my career independently. Well, they actually took the song because they technically owned it as the sound recording. They technically owned the sound recording as the label, but they didn't know that I had copywritten it as a composer. And so because I had copywritten it as a composer, then whoever owned that original copyright is the original owner of the copyright, even if the label comes back and tries to copyright it. And so that's what Ariston did. I was able to get in touch with some people at the label, luckily, in time to let them know, hey, this shouldn't have happened. What can we do to fix it? I'm willing to negotiate with you guys because I don't want to file a dispute, because if I file a dispute, nobody gets paid. So what can we do? And we worked out a substantial split that, I would get for the rest of my life.
Nice. So, but if you hadn't taken that step and actually copywritten the project,
I would have had to bite that bullet. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with one of my mom's friends who were in the industry, who was in this industry, and was, just kind of giving me some advice. And he was like, honey, you don't have the money. You don't have what it takes to go up against Air. So you might as well bite that bullet, honey. And I was like, no, but I actually own the copyright. So I don't have to. I'm going to go ahead and go for it. So it was a life-changing event. But, my story, I was blessed, and not everyone has that story. So.
Right. So back to the question on the copyright, because I think that was very enterprising at a young age for you to do that. You mentioned earlier to maybe do it quarterly if you've got a bunch of material. And then you mentioned a price of like $65 as an example. Is that $65 per piece?
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. They have an option now to do it as a volume, where you can do 10 in one volume and pay one fee.
Okay.
And so I think that's pretty cool, instead of having to do $65 every single time. Now, my administration company, the Mezzo Agency, we work with clients who just really don't have the time, nor do they really care about all of the paperwork that's involved with filing a copyright. And so obviously we would handle that, per song, just to make sure that each song is protected and has its own seal of certification. But in some cases, when you're doing demos and you're really just, as a songwriter, really trying to shop and get your material out, I would say it's best to just do it in volumes. And you may just have a spring volume, spring 2020 volume, and then you have a summer 2020 volume, and then you have a fall 2020 volume of all the songs that you culminated over, that period of time, just to save some extra bucks. Or if you feel like there's a record that's really special to you, you may want to copyright it individually as well. So it just all depends.
Okay, well, that makes sense. A question, so you get your stuff copywritten, and one of the things that we've seen a lot lately, I mean, here we're talking about songwriters and things like that, but, I've seen a lot of other folks like getting on TikTok and creating things, for example, like creating a dance or creating, some lyrics for something, so forth and so on. So how strongly do you feel about copywriting in general, just for creative, artistic work?
I just think ownership is very important. We're in a time now to where it's so many ways to be able to make money. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people making money off of works that they don't own, because it's just so easy to do it. And you don't have a lot of people that really understand intellectual property, And so while I don't know much about the dance side, as far as, copywriting on that side, I do know that any original work, whether it's poetry, a book, a short piece, a script, all of that can be copywritten, from you as the original owner of that work. And I think it's very important to protect yourself, because as we know, there are tons of movies out here that have all of a sudden ended up in the news years and years later behind someone saying, hey, he stole my script. That was my story, you know? And so it's the same thing happens with music as well. And we just have to be more mindful of our work and of our uniqueness. You know, I do believe that when we get those divine ideas, they definitely come from a much bigger place. And so we should protect that at all costs, because it could very well be something that changes your life forever, and your legacy, you know, to be able to take care of your family. A lot of people don't understand, but you know, there are people who are sons and daughters, you know, children, grandchildren of older musicians who are still able to collect, you know, royalties because the publishing was in order. And one of my clients is actually a deceased client, and we manage his estate. You know, he's an incredible gospel artist. Had one of the biggest songs, you know, that's still generating royalties to this day, but we protect his estate and we make sure that not only the publishing company that owns the sound recording and the masters, we make sure that they're taken care of quarterly when we pay out, but we also take care of their family and the members of the estate with the royalties that are generated. And so that's what publishing does. But if the copyright was not owned, you know, it creates no opportunity for revenue for your family or for yourself, or for, you know, for whoever it is that's a part of that work, trying to survive, just trying to have a means of survival these days, you know.
So explain the difference between copywriting and publishing.
So copyright actually gives you the right to collect publishing. Right. So you have two copyrights. You have a sound recording copyright, which is typically what the record label owns, to be able to put the song out after you've already composed it. And the artist that you like, I'm speaking from a songwriter standpoint. So if I write a song, I wrote the song, but we sold it to Keisha Cole. Keisha Cole, her label has to have their copyright on the sound recording side, but I still have my copyright on the composition side. And so because they own the sound recording, they've actually paid the producer, they've paid me my fee as the writer. We've already done all the paperwork and said, okay, you guys can distribute this. She's already recorded and they're ready for it to hit the shelves back in the day, or now hit the digital outlets. They own that copyright and they're able to distribute it, you know, make money off of it, get licensing and stuff, and just everything that comes with reproducing and getting it out to the masses to be able to generate money off of it. So that copyright on that side, on the sound recording side, gives them the right to do so. And then on the composition side, my copyright as a copyright holder of the composition, I have the right to then collect on my royalties, which would be my performance royalties, micro sync royalties, mechanical royalties, digital streaming royalties. As a copyright holder from the composition side, I have that right to be able to collect on those.
Okay, so I think you're really mentioning some revenue streams that the average person out here who's aspiring to get into business is really unfamiliar with. So can you break down some of the ways that you mentioned that you might be able to receive royalties?
Sure. So as a songwriter or producer, or if you're an indie artist who writes your own songs, you have the right to collect on performance royalties. Now, your performance royalties are simply your royalties that are performed in a live public setting. So it could be you're walking in the mall and you hear a song in the store while you're shopping. That is a performance royalty being generated for whoever wrote that song. Or if an artist goes on tour and they perform your song, that is a performance royalty that's generated. If the song is performed in clubs or bars, that's a performance royalty. And a lot of times, you know, there's not like a marshal going around going to all the clubs saying, hey, you played this song, you played that song. So some of that stuff gets paid, some of it doesn't. But the main thing is knowing that if your song is registered with a PRO, which is a performance rights organization, the big three are ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. Once you become a member and affiliate with either one of those, you can only be with one, you can register your songs, and as they get played, they have to be filed, and that filing creates a license, and that license generates a royalty so you can get paid for that work. Then you have your mechanical royalties. Your mechanical royalties, you know, we're not really we're not pressing up CDs anymore, but
No.
that was like the main way mechanical royalties were generated, because it was the pressing mechanically of an actual CD or a vinyl or a cassette. But we don't have that physical set anymore, and so now it's digitally reproduced, and so that's why it's a digital mechanical royalty. And then also, if there are any digital downloads that are directly downloaded from a store, like, you know, a digital streaming store, then it would be, well, in this case, a digital service provider, it will be considered a mechanical royalty. Then you have your micro sync royalty, which is YouTube royalties. Anything that is actually visually displayed, it generates a micro sync royalty. So YouTube is like by far one of our biggest royalty generators. I strongly suggest that if you have, you know, videos on YouTube and you have a lot of streams, a lot of views, you definitely want to go after that money, because YouTube by far pays out. They pay out in 3 ways. And so that's why those checks look a lot bigger compared to, you know, a performance royalty or compared to a mechanical.
When you say YouTube pays out in 3 ways, what do you mean?
Well, you have the composer that gets paid, you have the sound recording that gets paid, and then there's also advertisers that have to advertise on those channels, and there's a percentage that's actually split also when paid out. So it helps with revenue, because if you have 4.5 million views, you have all these different streams of income being generated off of that one video, but it's like 3 times, you know? And so, you know, without being too detailed, some of my clients, I mean, 80% of their revenue from royalties is from YouTube.
So I think it's important that we just double back for a second and say, 1, copyright your stuff, right? Because if you're not copywritten, then, okay. Secondly is to make sure that you're signed up with one of the big 3, ASCAP, CSAC, or BMI. What's the basic process to sign up with one of those 3?
Oh, yeah, really easy. BMI, I love BMI. I'm a member with both because I have publishing companies, but BMI is actually here. They really have a huge following here in Atlanta. But one thing I like about BMI, they're very simplistic. You go on to sign up as a writer is absolutely free. But if you want to have a publishing account, which I also suggest, I think it's $250. ASCAP, you have to sign up for $50 as a writer, and then $250 as a publisher. Anytime you sign up as a publisher, you will need a tax ID and an LLC. And for you guys who don't know what that is, a LLC is just basically a limited liability corporation or partnership, depending on what you go with, that helps protect you from your personal assets being affected if anything were to happen. There are a lot of other stipulations that you guys can look up on irs.gov, but we suggest LLCs for most musicians and music professionals. And then, of course, the tax ID, you need that for IRS purposes. As you receive monies, you have to pay taxes on those monies at the end of the year. They're going to send you a 1099, and it's your responsibility to file taxes for that previous year. So, yeah.
We always talk about it's the music business, right? So there's the business behind the music. So, you know, that's an important thing to note, is that, you know, we want to be creative and we want to be the artist and we want to write and we want to do all that. But then if your business is not handled, you know, you're really getting yourself in trouble. So I know there are some artists, I see some people checked in, that are truly independent. You know, they're not signed to a major label. They're getting the producers themselves. They're writing the songs themselves. They're performing the songs themselves. So what kind of advice would you give for somebody who's truly an independent artist?
Yeah, I mean, you literally have to function on both sides, the sound recording side and the composition side, because you are the songwriter who wrote the song, whether you contributed the lyrics or produced or did both. So you own the composition as well as owning the sound recording, because you're distributing it as a label. And so just making sure that you are registered with BMI, ASCAP, or CSAC, whoever you decide to go with, both as a songwriter and a publisher, because there are 2 royalties that are generated from that. So you get paid twice. Now, BMI, they're really cool about theirs, because if you are a songwriter, they'll also intertwine your publishing within that check, within that royalty check. Whereas with ASCAP, You either get paid for a songwriter and publishing 2 ways, or you just get paid for your as a songwriter. But you have to register both to get paid by both. So in my case, once I signed with a major publishing company, and we don't have to get too deep into like pub deals and stuff like that, but just to give you guys a heads up that I did a co-pub deal, meaning I shared a percentage of my publishing with the publishing company that I signed to when I was young. However, they did not touch my writer side. And so that's the great thing about publishing, is that you can leverage it. You can sell a piece off, you can buy it back, you can just do so much. It's like, I've explained publishing as like a house, right? And so you have all these songs that are in this publishing house, and just imagine them all having different value. And each song that has value, you can resell it, reproduce it, you can get more revenue for it, someone can cover it, you can make money off of it. And so it's just like real estate, it's like just renting out your songs, you know what I'm saying? And or putting them on the market and allowing them to be sold, and you continue to reap the benefits and the profits forever. So it's pretty cool.
There's the old saying that we have, it's like one huge hit record could really set you up if it's the right record and it's used in a particular way.
Sir Mix-a-Lot all day.
All day.
I mean, he's like, hey, I just write songs for the hell of it now. I just do it for fun because I've made so much money on Baby Got Back. I don't have to worry about anything forever.
Okay. We are going to take some questions, but I do want to touch, before we hit the questions, a little bit on licensing, because that's a large way that Sir Mix-a-Lot has been able to sustain, because people have licensed his song in commercials and various things. So will you just give me a basic rundown of what licensing is and how people are able to obtain those opportunities?
Yeah, so licensing is basically being able to give people a license to use your song in however way that, you approve. It's just like getting in the car. You can't really drive a car without a license legally. And so the license gives them the approval to be able to use, reproduce, and to even distribute out the song. But it covers you as the owner. The ownership never changes. You're just granting them permission to use it in certain ways so that they can do whatever they need to do. Meanwhile, you're collecting royalties off of whatever they're doing. And I would like to touch on some work that I did for Kiati. Kiati actually released the hit H-Town for Real.
Yes, legit hit. Still researching.
And so, my brother came to me. He was like, look, I got to get this clear because I want to do it right, And so that's exactly what we did. We actually tracked down the owner of that sample. And then from there, we did the negotiations. I worked with Sony because Sony actually owned the sound recording. And so now I've contacted the owner of the composition and the sound recording and got them to agree mutually on their fees. And then we did the deal. I worked with Kiati, let them know what the fees were. We negotiated, and now he's able to use that song legally whenever he needs to. And of course, we have an agreement set with Sony and with the composer, the writer, to be able to make sure that they're compensated for the work. And so that's basically what it is. It's just being able to have that clearance. Now, a lot of times you may have opportunities where people may listen to your song or discover your song on these streaming outlets, and they may say, hey, we would like to add your song to a commercial. Well, they're going to reach out with a license request and say, hey, we would like to use your commercial. We discovered your song. We think that it'll be fit great in this film or this commercial or this television show. And so from there, I would strongly suggest, if you're not using an agency like mine, like the Mezzo agency, that you have someone who is going to help you with figuring out the terms of the license, because that really helps when you have someone understanding the language. They can help you leverage more. They can help you make sure your fees are secured as well as your publishing. And so when those songs are picked up and placed, anytime you hear anything like in a Google commercial, they have like the best sync licenses where they're using all these different cool songs. It really creates revenue, another form of revenue outside of the general royalties that you would get if the song was out. And some songs are discovered that haven't even really been released or promoted, but they're on streaming outlets and the exposure is there. And so the music is discovered. And so I always love those stories. I always root for the underdog, because there's so many artists out here that are undiscovered or just still trying to break. and they just all of a sudden get that phone call, you know. But there are other licensing agencies that you can Google that, you know, will be able to help shop your songs. And you can sign up with them, and they'll, you know, give you different percentages based off of what the terms are for the agreement to be able to freely shop your music. So I would just say do your research, you know, how to license my music, what agencies can license my music. You can always head over to the Mezzo agency.
Yes, please.
And we can start the process there. You know, we have a music library that we're every day developing thematic songs, you know. And I also have a video on YouTube that kind of breaks down what licensing companies and supervisors are looking for. And you can watch that video at youtube.com/Tammy Littrell and just search licensing, or you can just do music licensing Tammy Littrell on YouTube. And my dear friend and music supervisor who works in LA, she has worked for Entertainment Tonight and so many